It all began August 6, 2010. David Bisard's police cruiser plows into 3 motorcycles late that morning. Assistant Police Chief Darrell Pierce gets to the scene and says Bisard did not appear to be drunk. At 12:21 p.m., one of the victims, Eric Wells, is pronounced dead. 3 others are seriously injured. That afternoon, Bisard's blood is tested and shows his alcohol content at more than twice the legal limit. August 11th, prosecutor Carl Brizzi's office files alcohol-related charges. Just 8 days later, Brizzi dismisses the charges, saying the blood draw would not be admissible in court.
Lawrence police say they actually got a phone call about a drunk driver. They actually followed Bisard's truck, they say, and he didn't drive erratically, so they didn't pull him over. Then the crash happened, and this police report says that you had Officer Bisard mentioning his past drunk driving crash in his patrol car, and this time around begging officers to let him go.
Well, he's not setting a very good example of being a police officer, drinking and driving, and, you know, if it's us, we still wouldn't be on the road after the first event.
I hope when he closes his eyes, he thinks about what he's done to my family and myself. I hope when he looks at his children, he thinks about the child he took from me.
Hello, and welcome back to Legal Dissent, where we evaluate your constitutional rights before they're taken away. Thank you so much for joining us, and as always, if you enjoy our content, please do consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and interacting with us in the comments below. It really does help us out a lot in the YouTube algorithm. Links to all of the news articles, case law, statutes, and any other sources we use are located in the description. Also, if you have videos you would like us to evaluate, send it our way. All of our contact information can be found in the description. When I created this channel, the main motivation was to inform and educate whoever would listen on what your rights are during encounters with law enforcement. The other motivating factor was to spotlight the corruption and double standards that currently exist in our government. The following story is a heartbreaking example of an officer who was accustomed to not following the rules because of the badge he wore, and how it destroyed the lives of so many people because of his irresponsible actions. David Bisard is a former Indianapolis Metro police officer who responded to a call on August 6, 2010. On his way to the scene, Officer Bisard used his police laptop to send text messages to another officer about elephant ears and what kind of food they would be getting at the fair, and joking about having mustard and ketchup on their police uniforms. The last message sent by Bisard was at 11:19 a.m. This computer-generated depiction is what prosecutors claimed during trial to have happened at 11:21 a.m., just 2 minutes after his last outbound text. Bisard turned on his lights and sirens, proceeded westbound on East 56th Street, cresting on the overpass above I-465 at an estimated 73 miles per hour. Then it switches to an overhead view showing the estimated rate of speed and when Bisard engaged the brakes on his vehicle, way too late to prevent his car from ramming into the motorcycles and sending Eric Wells flying onto the pavement. To recreate the scene, IMPD Sergeant Steve Park blocked off the streets and drove his car. He stated it was scary. I had to floor the gas pedal to get it to 76 and then had to slam on the brake. Officer Bisard claimed that the car's anti-braking system failed, and that is why he was unable to stop in time. The prosecution's witness, Jim Casasa, an engineer, testified that Bisard needed 240 feet to safely stop a car going at that speed. Photographs depict a 61-foot-long skid mark at the scene. Eric Wells tragically died on site. Kurt Weekly spent nearly a month in a coma and suffered permanent brain damage as a result of the crash. Kurt's then fiancée, Mary Mills, was also badly hurt because of this incident. While the accident was tragic enough, what happened next rocked the community, led to new laws being passed in Indiana, caused the police chief to resign, and ultimately destroyed the public's trust in the very people who have sworn to protect and serve the community. One of the greatest points of contention with this case was about the improper collection and handling of the blood. It was originally held to be inadmissible in court until the Indiana Court of Appeals evaluated the situation in State v. Bisard. Indiana law at the time required alcohol-related blood draws to be taken at a hospital and not at a clinic. Despite this clear law, the police took Bisard to a clinic where Officer Stan Stevens had a medical assistant perform the blood draw. Stevens had her use expired collection tubes, and the assistant also initially used an alcohol swab to clean Bisard's arm. Obviously, you're not supposed to do that, as the alcohol in the swab could potentially invalidate the draw. After taking the blood draw, the assistant insisted on sealing the tubes per policy, but Officer Stevens did not do so before placing the tubes in a bag. This is important because an unsealed tube could be susceptible to being tampered with later on. All of these irregularities are huge for a criminal defense attorney because any of these issues could potentially invalidate the blood draw and have the case thrown out in court. I want to point out right now that Bisard's attorney was in the room during the blood draw. This should scream to everyone how important it is to lawyer up as soon as possible in a criminal situation. Now, it is different for a police officer as opposed to a normal person because the police union foots the bill for legal representation. The Fraternal Order of Police later admitted that they spent over $250,000 defending Bisard from 2010 through 2013. The results of the blood draw showed that Bisard's blood was 0.19, well over twice the legal limit of 0.08. These test results are the only evidence of intoxication in the record. On the scene, not a single police officer suspected or questioned Bisard about being intoxicated. No one conducted field sobriety tests, no one noticed the smell of alcohol, and no one tried to follow protocol when collecting his blood 2 hours after the crash. Due to all of the mishandling of the blood and the mistakes made by the police, Bisard's first blood test was initially thrown out, and the alcohol-related charges were dropped by prosecutors. However, this was all going on during an election year, and on January 12th, new prosecutor Terry Curry refiled the DUI charges in addition to the reckless homicide charges. Curry then wanted to test a second vial of Bisard's blood, which they discovered had been moved out of refrigeration in the evidence room, and no one had discovered this until April 17th, 2012, almost 2 years after the blood was initially drawn. This revelation caused Mayor Greg Ballard to call in the FBI to take over the investigation. Ballard stated, "At best, this matter shows gross incompetence. At worst, possible criminal intent." Police Chief Paul Siselsky also resigned that same day. Public Safety Director Frank Straub said in response to the situation, "This is 30 or 40 or 50 years of neglect. And what I've heard from the management of the police department over and over and over again during the 2 years and 4 months that I've been here is that we knew this was going on. We just never bothered to fix it. We knew officers were drinking on duty. We knew that officers were going to strip clubs, but we didn't take action. We didn't hold ourselves or those other officers accountable." Straub also resigned later on that month. 3 times Bisard's blood was mishandled. It was collected improperly, stored improperly, and left unrefrigerated for months. How does this happen unintentionally? Bisard was charged with reckless homicide, drunk driving, criminal recklessness, and other charges. The case was moved from Indianapolis to Fort Wayne because of the media attention. While out on bond and awaiting trial, Bisard was reported driving drunk yet again. Police officers found him and followed him, but they did not pull him over because he was allegedly not driving erratically. However, he later ran into a telephone pole.
A witness who lives nearby says Bisard was rocking his truck back and forth trying to get out of these ruts after he plowed into a guardrail and a light pole on Indian Lake Boulevard South just after 2 p.m. Lawrence police arrived, and at first he denied that he had been drinking, but then the police report obtained by the Call 6 investigator says he changed his tune. When the officer asked how much he'd been drinking, he answered, quote, "I'm not really sure. I've been drinking since noon, and I'm not going to say I've had two like everyone else does." Then the report says Bisard pleaded, "I know you know who I am. I messed up today. If you guys can cut me a break, I promise I will never drink again." The report says Bisard's balance was unsteady, his movements were slow, his face was red, and his eyes were bloodshot and glassy. His new mugshot after he was booked today seems to bear that out. Police wrote that Bisard said if he goes to jail this time, his life will be over. Then Bisard freely stated that he was guilty today and he would fully admit to driving drunk today, and then stated that he was not drinking on the day of that other crash. He was referring to the deadly crash in August 2010 in his patrol car when he slammed into a group of bikers at a stoplight, killing one man and seriously wounding two other bikers. The same officer from that crash told today's investigating officers again that he has a wife and kids at home and his life is over if he goes to prison.
Eric Wells' family received a settlement worth $1.55 million for his wrongful death. Kurt Weekly and Mary Mills received $2.3 million in a settlement from the city. Bisard was eventually sentenced to 13 years in prison for the reckless homicide of Eric Wells.
David Bisard remained silent moments after leaving the courthouse, after the judge sentenced him to 13 years in prison. But inside the courtroom, Bisard wept and apologized to his victims for an accident that caused so much pain and so much damage to many families, including his own. Bisard said he was guilty of speeding August 6, 2010. "I'm guilty," he said, "of looking down at my laptop." But he added, "I'm not going to accept responsibility for driving intoxicated," because, he said, "I wasn't." His clinging to the denial of drunk driving didn't sit well with the judge and nearly everyone else in the courtroom.
I didn't expect a revelation by him or an admission that he was intoxicated. I think it is evident, as their own witness testified, that he's simply not willing to admit to it, and he's deceiving himself, and by deceiving himself, he's deceiving all of us.
Despite being sentenced to 13 years, Bisard only spent 4 years behind bars and was released in 2017.
State prison officials say Bisard is getting out early due to credits for good behavior, also getting an associate's degree while in prison, and for completing a substance abuse program.
This whole situation reeks of corruption, and the punishment does not, in my opinion, fit the crime. A man's life was ended because Bisard chose to drive drunk, chose to drive recklessly fast, and chose to combine these factors with sending messages about elephant ears to another officer. Then, after all of this, he chose to drive intoxicated yet again. What do you think? Was this a poorly executed cover-up? Was 4 years enough? Did the family receive justice? Let me know in the comments below, and remember that no matter who you are, you have value and you have rights. Do not be afraid to use them, and we'll see you next time right here on Legal Dissent.